Nothing But the Words, episode number 13, How to Write the First Draft of Your Book.
Welcome to Nothing But the Words, the podcast that gives you everything you need to know to write a phenomenal book. Now here's your host, your author coach, Candace L. Davis.
Hey there, welcome to Nothing But the Words. I'm your author coach, Candace L. Davis, and in this episode, I want to talk about what the process of writing a great book actually looks like. Not the publishing, not the marketing, not even the planning. I've already covered the pre-writing stuff in previous episodes. Today, I want to talk about the process of actually sitting down to write and why so many people struggle with that and how you can get past that struggle. As I'm recording this, we are still in the midst of the coronavirus pandemic, and so many people are sharing with me on social media and in private conversations that they're really struggling to write at this moment. Of course, a lot of that is due to the distractions of what we have going on in the world around us, the way that people are thinking about the coronavirus pandemic, and the stress and the uncertainty and the fear that can come with some of those thoughts. Perfectly reasonable, and it can create a distraction. I covered some tools you can use to deal with those distractions in episodes 8 and episode number 11. But in this episode, I actually want to talk about a more common reason why we struggle to write, and that includes even during this go round while we are in a major world crisis. People are struggling to write, and it's not always because of the distraction of the crisis. After you've done the planning of your book, you've done your outline, you've done any necessary research, it's time to sit down and actually write. And a lot of first-time authors really have no idea what to expect. In fact, much too often, they think writing a book is just a matter of sitting down to put words on the page. And that's true to some extent, but it's also not the full picture. When you sit down to write, you're not writing your book. You're not even writing a chapter or a page, so don't be overwhelmed. You're just writing the first draft of your book. You're writing the first draft of that chapter or of that particular page. And here is a very liberating truth. Your first draft will not be good. It's not supposed to be. When I first learned this, I actually didn't quite believe it. I thought, okay, that's great for some people, but I've got to make sure my first draft is great. And I spent a lot of time hemming and hawing trying to get a great first draft written, and it's not necessary. Maybe possible for a few very talented and gifted exceptions, but it is not necessary. And in fact, trying to write a great first draft will slow you down and make it more difficult for you to finish your book. You do not have to struggle to make your first draft good when you're writing. That's a waste of time. At this point, you really just need to get coherent words on the page. It's okay if you've used the same word 7 times in the same paragraph. It's okay if your paragraphs do not flow well from one to the next in your first draft. It's perfectly okay if you are missing a key piece of information in that first draft and you know you need it, as long as you go back and put it in later. It's perfectly fine if this first draft is something you really don't want anyone to ever look at. In fact, your first draft should really be for your eyes only. Even when I'm coaching clients, I never ask them to send me their first draft. I always suggest, highly, strongly suggest, that they revise and review that content before they send it to me, because the better they can make it, the better feedback I can give to them. Yesterday, I actually had a Zoom call with a friend who is a naturally gifted writer. She's one of those people who that was a gift that God gave her. She came into the world with the ability to write really well. And she's not only tells a good story, she's not just a good storyteller, which is a great talent to have, but she's also really great at writing a beautiful sentence, a memorable turn of phrase. Her prose flows and carries the reader right along with it. She has a book deal with a major publisher, and there is no question in my mind that this woman can write. Okay, she's a great writer. I was really excited to talk to her, but largely because while I was purging my office recently, I found an old purple binder, like a school binder, with an early draft of her first published book in it. And so I showed it to her while we were on video conference, and her response was throw it away. That early draft is nothing like her finished product. It's not nearly as good as what she eventually published. However, if she had never gotten that first draft done, a first draft which I'm sure she looks at and kind of cringes right now, she would have never finished her book. She would have never gotten the book deal that came with it. She would have never began her career as a published author. Even though she can hardly stand to look at that first draft, it was what she needed to create in order to reach her ultimate goal of writing a phenomenal book, which she did and has since written two more, one of which will be coming out very soon. When you sit down to write, if you've done the pre-writing work that I discussed in other episodes, like knowing who your one perfect reader is and what problem you're trying to solve for them, or what goal you're trying to help them achieve, whether you're trying to entertain, enlighten, educate, or what have you, if you've done that work, if you have a strong outline, which is the plan for your book, if you have a structure for your chapters, you are off to a fantastic start and you are ready to write this first draft of your book. If you're writing a memoir or fiction, you should know your characters fairly well. You should know what they want. You should know what's in the way and whether or not they're going to get it. You have these basics already written down. You've done the pre-writing work. It's time to write that first draft. The goal of the first draft is just to get the content on the page. It only needs to be coherent enough that you can go back to revise it and begin to make it publishable. It won't be publishable in and of itself. Believe me, first drafts are not something that should be sent out into the world. So as you're writing it, don't stop to try to make it perfect. Don't get caught up in correcting things just because you see that they could be better as you're writing the first draft. So if you can't think of the exact words you want to use, don't stop for 20 minutes to search your thesaurus or to switch over to Google to look it up. Just put in a placeholder. Use the word that comes to mind. I'll usually put the word in all caps, and then I'll add 3 asterisks next to it. That will mark the spot I want to come back to. So when you're using a Microsoft Word or any other word processor to write, you can use the find function to just put in those 3 asterisks and go back and find it. Some people still use capital T, capital K from the old publishing days, but just as simple for me to put in 3 asterisks and be able to find it very, very easily. If you realize you need, at this point, a supporting statistic, or this is a place where you needed to put a case study and you don't have it right now, or if you need to verify a fact, do not stop in your writing session to look it up. Use a placeholder, and then in your research time, you can look it up, or when you come back to do your revisions, you can find the information that you need to put there. If you are really stuck and you can't get started, go back to your outline, take one chapter and make a list of questions that your reader would have about that chapter. It doesn't matter if it's a memoir, how-to book, narrative, nonfiction, if you're recounting a historical event, doesn't matter what it is. Make a list of questions your reader might have. That's a great way to get you started creating the content that your readers will ultimately want and that you will ultimately give them for your book, and just type up the answers to those questions to get you started on your draft. Now, I often, as many of my colleagues know and are still freaked out a little bit about, I often will start by writing first draft with pen and paper. You don't have to do it that way, but it's often a way that you can get more easily into the flow. So if you're stuck and you've been sitting at your computer for 15 minutes and you only have 45 minutes to write, close your computer for a minute and get a piece of paper and just write a page. If you can write a page on a topic from your outline, that's a great way to get started. And when you're typing it up into your document, that will actually give you a chance to make some slight revisions in the process of transferring it from your notebook paper to the computer. So that's an easy way to really jumpstart your writing when you're feeling stuck. Once you get started, keep writing. You want to get into the flow of telling the story or writing whatever content you're working on. And it's hard to do that when you keep stopping to tab over to Google to look something up, or to tab over to check your email, or to stop to pick up your phone to see what that notification was. Allow yourself to focus without distraction. Tell the people you love most that you need this moment to concentrate and do not call you unless it's an emergency. Put your phone on do not disturb for the other people who may not know that this is your writing moment, because allowing yourself time will give you time to go deeper into the content. You will have the ability to make connections that you might not see when you don't have the opportunity to go deeper, and you will likely produce better content. So, stopping and starting makes it difficult to get into the flow. It's not impossible. You could certainly write a book in 20-minute spurts if you wanted to, but I don't recommend it because you need the opportunity often to go deeper into the writing, even when you're writing that first draft. Now, as you write the first draft, don't focus on quality. Don't get caught up in trying to make it perfect. Don't get caught up in what your editor or your author coach or your mother or your colleagues or your clients might say. Don't worry about it. Quality will come in the rewriting process. Commit early on to that idea that you will have to revise your work several times before it goes out into the world. Not once, not twice, but probably several times. One of the reasons self-published books will sometimes get a bad rap is that the authors don't take enough time to revise their work. I am clearly not talking about all self published authors, but the difference is when you publish traditionally, there's an editor who stands there and says, this work is good enough to publish or not. So often, you will have to reach a certain level of quality before they will buy your book, and certainly before they will publish your book. Well, when you're self publishing, you have all of that responsibility on you even before you get to a copy editor. And a copy editor is not generally going to tell you yes or no, you can publish it. They're just going to fix things like typos and inconsistencies and grammatical errors. It falls upon you to decide what quality is worth putting out into the world, what quality you're willing to have your name on. So it's not going to be first draft quality. After you've written your first draft, you're going to need to revise your manuscript. You're probably going to want to get feedback from someone. It may be beta readers, it may be an author coach, it may be someone who's just doing a content review for you, but you're going to want to get feedback from somebody. And beta readers are just your first readers who you give a copy of your manuscript to get feedback on. It's usually not a paid thing. It's just colleagues or friends or associates who are willing to give you some feedback on your book. So that's a way you can get feedback. But even before your manuscript gets to those people, you should have revised it. No one wants to slog through a first draft. It's just not what anyone wants to read. So free yourself to write that first draft knowing no one's going to read it. The process of rewriting is a big part of what separates bad books from good books and good books from great books. Writing well requires rewriting, but that's not happening when you write your first draft. Rewriting is important, and I'll share more in a future episode of exactly what you need to look for in the rewriting process. But right now, I want you to focus, if you haven't finished your first draft, on finishing that. Know this, I've written dozens of books at this point in my career, but in the beginning of my writing career, I left several books unwritten. I had great ideas. I outlined them. I mapped them out. I never wrote them. I left several books halfway written. I got halfway through and quit. 80% of the way written. And I didn't finish them because I thought my first draft had to be good. I could not just allow myself to push through a beginning, a middle, and an end and be done, and then give myself the time to revise it. It was a rookie mistake, honestly. And it's not a mistake you need to make. It's not something you need to allow to hold you back. If you want to write a great book, if you want to write a phenomenal book, and I hope that you do because it's something that will last essentially forever, it's a legacy you're going to leave with your name on it, then the quality of your writing counts. But you are not going to create that quality in the first draft. Take action this week by sitting down to write the first draft of the next page of your book, whether it's the first page or whether you're almost done, or the next chapter of your book. What matters at this stage is getting that beginning, middle, and end on the page. If you've done the pre-writing work that I talk about and you're following your outline for the most part, with adjustments as needed, right? Because it's not written in stone. It's something that you can change as needed. Then you will be able to produce a complete draft of your book if you just keep writing. Answer questions if you get stuck. Write out questions for yourself for that chapter, questions your reader would have, and just answer those questions. When you're done with this first draft, you will not be done writing. You won't. You'll still have to go through a few stages of revisions. You'll want to get feedback possibly from beta readers, as I mentioned. You'll definitely, before your book goes out to the world, want to work with a professional editor. And no, your first draft is not what you're going to send to that editor. No one, no writing coach, no editor, no one wants to see your first draft of your book. You should always be revising it to the best of your ability before you send it to anyone. That doesn't mean you're trying to make it perfect. You're just trying to make it as good as you can before you send it to anyone. But when you finish your first draft, you will be closer than the vast majority of people who say they want to write a book ever get to doing it. You will be probably at least 50% of the way to becoming a published author. So don't allow any ideas of perfectionism to get in your way. Don't get caught up in the idea that you need to write this as a complete finished product the first time around. You can come back and fill in the holes and fill in the gaps, and you should be prepared and committed to the idea that you will revise this. I'm going to say at least 3 more times. And by revising, I don't mean you're rewriting the whole book. You're just reading from the first page to the last page and making changes as you see fit, making changes as recommended by your author coach, by your editor, by your beta readers, by a trusted friend, whoever it is that's giving you feedback on your book. So just be committed to that process. Sit down and write this first draft. You cannot get a book written unless you're willing to do that. And the moment you accept that your first draft is not going to be great, but that you will have opportunities to make it into a great book, the faster you will get to actually becoming a published author. Thanks for listening to this episode of Nothing But the Words. I'm your author coach, Candace L. Davis. If you enjoyed this episode, if it was helpful to you, please subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you can take a moment to leave me a great review, I will truly appreciate it. I'll see you next time. Stay safe, stay well, and go write something.